It started with a whisper, not the kind that spreads gossip, but the kind that signals a storm, the kind that carries weight even before the words are spoken. On a quiet afternoon, when the internet was half distracted and Buckingham Palace looked like it always did, grand, unmoved, untouchable, something shifted. A message popped up on the royal website, simple, vague, and cold as stone. A formal announcement will be made at 6:00 p.m. No names, no context, just that. And that's all it took. Phones lit up, newsrooms snapped into motion, speculation ran wild. Did something happen to the king? Was someone stepping down? Was there a health scare? Or worse, no one knew and the palace wasn't saying a word. The silence was the loudest part. But at 6:00 p.m. sharp, the world didn't get the grandeur it expected. No palace balcony, no royal trumpets, just a video. It opened with Prince William and Kate Middleton sitting in what looked like a cozy sunlit study, not a throne room. No royal crests, no ceremonial uniforms, just two people, calm and deliberate, sitting side by side, staring straight into the lens like they were speaking to every living room across the country. William spoke first, steady, clear, and with the weight of generations on his shoulders. The monarchy, he said, isn't about maintaining an image, it's about serving people. If we lose that, we lose everything. Kate followed, and this was no soft-spoken side-by-side royal wife routine. She didn't blink. This isn't about tradition anymore, it's about trust. We either evolve or we become irrelevant. That was it. That's when everyone knew this wasn't business as usual. This was a royal earthquake. No abdications, no dramatic farewells, but something even more daring. William and Kate were rewriting the entire royal playbook without asking for anyone's permission. They weren't stepping down, they were stepping out of the tight mold that had bound royals for centuries. They were taking on new roles, still part of the monarchy, but no longer defined by its cold, formal protocols. They wanted to lead with empathy, to connect, not just wave, to act, not just represent. At the center of this transformation was something Kate called the Diana Initiative, a foundation built in memory of William's late mother. But this wasn't just a tribute, it was a statement. A mission to do what Diana always tried to do: help people who felt invisible, the grieving, the abused, the unheard. And Kate didn't present it as some polite cause. She took ownership. She would lead it, she would be hands-on, she would be present. What stood out wasn't just the announcement, it was how quiet it was. No royal spectacle, no press events staged on palace steps, just honesty. And that honesty, it hit differently. It made everything else the royals ever said before feel rehearsed, like we'd finally been let into a conversation that had been going on behind palace walls for years. But here's the thing, while the public cheered, while news anchors called it a modern moment and Twitter crowned Kate the people's queen, behind the scenes, things weren't so calm. The silence from Buckingham Palace after the video dropped, that wasn't elegance, that was tension. Deep, bitter tension. Because this wasn't just about changing direction, it was about taking control. And doing it without the king's blessing. And if you know anything about royal protocol, you know that silence can be more dangerous than shouting. William and Kate had just gone off script, and everyone at the palace knew it. Inside the palace, doors were closed, voices hushed, and the air thick with disbelief. King Charles watched the video alone from Clarence House, and according to someone close, he barely spoke once it ended. Just muttered, "What did they do?" It wasn't just confusion, it was betrayal wrapped in shock. Not because William and Kate said anything scandalous, but because they didn't act. There was no heads up, no approval, no royal chain of command. They went live to the nation without so much as a nod from the king, and in a monarchy built on hierarchy, that wasn't bold, that was explosive. Behind those ornate palace walls, advisors were scrambling. Do they release a response? Do they spin it? Do they ignore it? The problem wasn't the message, it was beautiful, polished, and frankly popular. The real issue was the method. It looked like the future monarchs had just bypassed the monarchy. Queen Camilla was said to be livid, not publicly, of course, she smiled for the cameras, like always, but privately, boiling. Kate's sudden emergence as the face of compassion, as the heir to Diana's emotional throne, was a nightmare Camilla thought she'd buried long ago. For years, she'd worked tirelessly to repair her image, to be seen not as the woman who replaced Diana, but as a queen in her own right. But Kate had reignited something the public hadn't felt in decades. that emotional connection, that sense of realness. And she didn't do it with press interviews or PR campaigns. She did it by showing up and speaking with her chest. The Diana initiative especially cut deep. It wasn't subtle, it didn't try to appease anyone. It was a direct link to the legacy Camilla had spent years trying to eclipse. Kate wasn't trying to erase Camilla. She didn't have to. All she had to do was remind the world of who Diana was, and in doing so, she reminded them of everything Camilla could never be. The press caught on instantly. Front pages were filled with photos of Kate comforting domestic violence survivors, William sitting quietly with teens battling mental illness, the two of them attending community events without fanfare, the diamonds greater than suffering. But what struck everyone wasn't the setting, it was the lack of distance. No bodyguards forming a wall, no staged photo ops, just two people being people. But even as their approval rating soared, not everyone was thrilled. Some traditionalists whispered that William was undermining the monarchy, that he was stepping out of line, that Kate was overstepping her place, that the institution was being softened by this whole modern empathy thing. But the truth? The public didn't care. They didn't want more tradition, they wanted connection. It wasn't just what William and Kate were doing, it was what they weren't doing. No lavish ceremonies, no meaningless titles for the sake of pageantry. They refused to take new royal residences, they declined formal portraits, they focused their energy on audits, transparency, and setting up infrastructure that could actually help people. For once, the spotlight wasn't on the monarchy as an institution, it was on the individuals choosing to lead with purpose, not privilege. It was no longer about who was wearing the crown, it was about who was showing up. And Kate, she wasn't waiting for a title to lead, she was already doing it. Inside royal circles, the shift was undeniable. The energy, the attention, the influence, it was all leaning toward Kensington, and no amount of royal silence could stop that. Something had cracked. Not loud enough to break the palace, but deep enough to shake it. William didn't flinch. While the palace whispered and reporters speculated, he kept moving forward, like he'd already made peace with the backlash. This wasn't rebellion for the sake of attention, it was personal. Years of watching his mother be erased by royal image control had left scars no crown could heal. Now, with Kate by his side, he was setting a new course, not out of anger, but out of clarity. He knew exactly what kind of legacy he wanted to leave, and it had nothing to do with palaces. Behind the scenes, he started making quiet moves that spoke louder than any royal announcement. He reached out to family members who had long been sidelined, Beatrice, Eugenie, even Zara, not out of obligation, but to offer something rare within the firm, honesty. He told them they didn't need to pretend anymore, that their roles didn't have to be dictated by image or bloodline. What mattered now was character. These weren't performative gestures. William had one goal, to build a team rooted in trust and purpose, and he wanted to tear down the invisible walls that had turned the royal family into a cold, distant brand. And he wasn't afraid to call out the dysfunction. He told his closest advisors that the monarchy wouldn't survive another generation of pretending. Either it evolved or it expired. Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, became an unexpected anchor in all this. She'd spent decades walking the tightrope between old-school tradition and quiet progress. William saw her not just as a seasoned royal, but as someone who understood what it meant to serve without shouting. He brought her into the fold, not with fanfare, but with trust. Together, they began laying the groundwork for something more human, a monarchy that listens, not just rules. While Charles stuck to scripted speeches and ceremonial appearances, William was out there in muddy boots and rolled up sleeves. He joined Kate at youth shelters, listened at addiction recovery centers, sat through hours of meetings with counselors, educators, and health workers. There were no press releases, no royal fanfare, just presence. And the public noticed. Approval ratings soared, not just among the younger generation, but even those who'd once sworn off the monarchy. People weren't falling in love with the crown again, they were finally seeing something underneath it worth respecting. For the first time in a long time, it felt like the royals weren't just showing up, they were showing up for something. Camilla, meanwhile, watched from the sidelines. Everything she'd tried to polish, her image, her role, her place beside the king, suddenly felt fragile. Every moment Kate embraced Diana's legacy, Camilla's presence presence felt more like a placeholder than a partner to the throne. It wasn't Kate's intention to overshadow, but the truth was unavoidable. She wasn't just filling Diana's shoes, she was walking a path of her own, and people were following. Charles knew it too. His reign, years in the making, now felt more like a footnote than a fresh start. He remained king in name, but influence had drifted quietly to the next generation. He could hold the crown, but he couldn't hold back the current. The monarchy hadn't crumbled, it had evolved. Not through war, not through exile, but through quiet conviction. William and Kate didn't dismantle the system, they redefined it. Not for tradition's sake, but for truth. No crowns were snatched, no thrones were toppled, but in the hearts of the people, the future had already arrived, and it wore empathy like armor.